Today is going to be a little bit of a off-camera thing. Just random thoughts and what I've had about after watching yesterday's Doctor Who, and this kind of a follow-up and speculative reactions and things like that is going through that episode, especially like two more times. It's still a great episode, and there's still all the emotions and feelings, and I just kind of want to throw a few things out there, because we know Stephen Moffat, loves to build worlds, even if he's not gonna fully follow up on them. He loves to build worlds, and in that, he generally also likes to cater to the Doctor at the time. In this particular case, was Peter Capaldi, and with Peter Capaldi, he was a massive Doctor Who fan. You can look up like the Graham Norton and various other interviews where he talks about how he's a massive Doctor Who fan, how he's been a fan of Doctor Who for years. Well, and that got me to thinking a little bit after watching yesterday's episode. One thing to think about is throughout the season is we've had this overarching thing that about Bill's relationship and especially Bill's relationship with Heather, the pilot. And that came to a close rather brilliantly and beautifully yesterday with Heather, the pilot, taking Bill off to the wild, dark, and whatnot. But that doesn't answer the question of what it is, what the pilot is. Yes, we know it's sentient oil. Yes, we know it's... We know it came off a spaceship. Okay. Question remains is what kind of spaceship. Now, could be, and this is the first speculative thing, is the first thing is it could be, what if the quote-unquote pilot and the sentient oil is actually neither of those? It's neither actually the sentient oil off a spaceship. Or if it is sentient oil off a spaceship, what kind of spaceship could have sentient oil like that? What kind of ship could really demand that? And with all the expanded universe stuff and everything else I've read, because I'm a big Doctor Who fan, one thing my brain just keeps leaping to is what if Heather is the oil, or even in actuality a like Type 90 TARDIS. Now, for those who are wondering what the hell like a Type 90 TARDIS is, that was something that premiered in the Time War books. Since the revival, it's kind of appeared in side stuff, Time War books. And a Type 90 TARDIS is one of the most advanced, one of the most sophisticated, and one of the most powerful TARDISes. It's not a war unit. It's not like a Sid Rat or anything like that. It is it's a TARDIS, but it has a feature that makes it rather unstable, rather unpredictable. It can take a humanoid form. But as we know from The Doctor's Wife, a brilliant episode written by Neil Gaiman, that TARDISes can't really, especially since they are a multi-spatial temporal entity, can't really interact with a single time zone well. So that would indicate that perhaps that the oil slick, or that the oil slick itself is the Type 90 TARDIS, or it's the remnants off of a Type 90 TARDIS that integrated with Heather, creating this living, interactable component that is stabilized. Now, we've seen that, especially since the return of Gallifrey and other things in the revival of Doctor Who. So it wouldn't be too far-fetched in the realm of speculation, especially when dealing with a science fiction TV show that deals with a time-traveling madman in a box, that this woman who was consumed, absorbed, integrated into the piloting systems could be a multispatial, trans-dimensional, time-traveling box. Now, some people may sit there and go, "Well, that's utterly crazy. That's a little bats, But you have to consider that she was able to track them across time and space and dimensions at a whim. In that first episode, she did it without a problem. And then when Bill direly needed her, and when she direly needed Bill, she was suddenly there. She could bypass the Doctor's TARDIS's defenses and protocols and whatnot with ease, taking herself and Bill and the Doctor and putting her onto the TARDIS. She was able to pilot the TARDIS. Now it was a throwaway line of, "Oh, well, I'm the pilot. I can pilot anything." But we've seen people who are advanced pilots throughout the series who can, supposedly pilot anything, have issues with a TARDIS, especially a TARDIS that is sentient and one that is very attached to her Time Lord, and about who can and cannot pilot her. After all, would Idris, that sweet, lovely, lovely TARDIS that she is, allow something that would be possibly dangerous to pilot her? No. So it is a interesting question I bring up is Heather a Type 90 TARDIS and not just a sentient oil slick? Especially since she needed a companion and a co-pilot in the form of Bill. So that's just one thing that kind of sits at the back of my brain going, that could be very interesting. Another thing, and this is something that I live in deep, serious hope, and they've teased it here and there. They've danced around it because the BBC has very much a strict, we don't talk about this policy, we don't talk about this subject, we don't talk about this thing, because it's a strange note in Doctor Who. And that is when we saw Peter Capaldi's Doctor refusing to change, refusing to become another person, to accept regeneration, and he fought it, and we've seen this happen before. We saw David Tennant's fight it. David Tennant's 10th Doctor fight it. We saw kind of a acceptance, but a begrudging acceptance, and not exactly an entirely happy demeanor about regenerating. The 9th Doctor, Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, he fully accepted it, but he was still saddened because he knew he was going to become a whole new person. But Peter Capaldi's Doctor is very much in the refusal of changing, especially since they are in a unknown territory of regenerations and in an unknown territory of things that are going to happen from here on out as he regenerates, as he changes, as he becomes a new man. And the BBC's policy is they don't talk about the Valeyard. And that is something you can actually Google and look up and whatnot. They have very much a policy about avoiding talking about the Valeyard. And we've gotten little snippets here in the IDW comics, which are, I guess, canon to a certain extent, brought up a parasite alien that was masquerading as the Metacrisis 10th Doctor, claiming to be the Valeyard. We got the Great Intelligence, which talked about the various names that the Doctor was to still receive before his end of the oncoming storm, of the beast, of the Valeyard. We've got hints of it from Toby Jones appearing as the quote-unquote Dream Lord, a dark manifestation of the Doctor's psyche, twisted and perverted and trickster, but very malicious, with a piece of parasite particles that ended up in the TARDIS's time drive. So they've hinted and danced around it because of BBC's policies about the Valeyard. And what we do know is the Valeyard is supposed to be this has been loosened up and broadened up a little bit because the rules were originally instated that he was an incarnation of the Doctor between his 12th and final regenerations. Well, since the Doctor has received a whole new slew of regenerations thanks to the Time Lords, we don't know when that could be. We don't know exactly how that's going to happen, especially since even Rassilon in the episode Hellbent and whatnot, and Heaven Sent, sat there and said, they don't know how many regenerations they gave him, so they could be there all day. So the number of somewhere between his 12th and his final regeneration is a impossibly large number. But with how Peter Capaldi has, his doctor has reacted and refusing to regenerate, refusing to change, how he wants to be kind and decent, but he is still very alien, very sociopathic. He's treading a fine line between being a very dark doctor and being the doctor, where he nearly crosses the line of losing the title of the doctor. And we could see that, especially there at the end, as he refuses his regeneration, as he refuses to accept that he is going to become another man, and he doesn't want to change. He doesn't want to become another man. He doesn't want this to happen. So, what we could see is, and it would be rather enticingly exciting to me, especially since the encounter with Peter Capaldi there at the end, he encounters Doug Bradley playing William Hartnell's The First Doctor. We could see, quite possibly, and depending on how the story plays out, a branching timeline scenario where Peter Capaldi's doctor does become the Valeyard, but he still regenerates. After all, the Valeyard itself is a flawed regeneration. It's a midway point. It's not a proper regeneration. So we could see something like that appear, and I think it would actually be exciting to see the 13th Doctor, I should say, the official 13th Doctor, who would be the 14th Doctor, or something like that, however those numbers work anymore, battle with the Valeyard, which would also give them a reason to extend Peter Capaldi's contract, or keep him around, because since they once again killed the Master, at least for now, they would need a very roguelike, very impossible, very trickster and evil Time Lord to battle with the Doctor across the stars. And who better than the Doctor himself? A flawed, dark, terrible regeneration that we would see the beginning of. We could see where it began. We could see what would eventually lead to it trying to stop the Doctor before he walked down that darkest path in that darkest timeline, all the way back. That would explain his motivation for trying to steal the generations, or besides trying to extend his life. And with how it said that Sylvester McCoy's death and Paul McGann's death were to avoid the Valeyard. Well, could be interesting to see how that could actually play into that. Why going all the way back to that point? Why go all the way back there to stop it, when he could have gone back to the first, or he could have gone back to the 7th or the 9th, or any other regeneration? Why to that point, besides the obvious storytelling points that are present there? One thing I do deeply appreciate is that actually they kind of opened up this door in a strange way. Is they opened up the door for the explanation of why the modern Cybermen in the universe look like the Cybus Industry Cybermen, while there's still Modesian Cybermen around. And they actually explain that quite well. But they left some gaping plot holes in there, because if that was the entirety of the military invasion force of the Cybermen, of the military bracket at the time on the ship, then why does it take so many centuries for the Mondasian Cybermen to re-upgrade themselves to that point? Why does that is a point that kind of sticks in my craw a little bit, because when we see them first appear in Doctor Who way back in the day, even if they were ridiculous then, and they're still kind of ridiculous, but still somewhat terrifying. They're men, but they aren't men. They're men that have things over top of them. They look like guys in a suit. And we learn that the guys in the suit isn't exactly inaccurate, just a lot of the fleshy, organic bits have been chopped off and thrown away. That's why they liked preying on the children, because less things to throw away. Which in itself is terrifying. Very terrifying. And I just kind of wonder why it took so long, especially since I remember somewhere in a deleted scene, or maybe it was an EU book, explaining why the main universes, the Mondasian Cybermen, upgraded to look like the Cybus Industries Cybermen. Was they had found remains and scraps of the Cybus Industries Cybermen, and that led to a significant upgrade. There is also the Cybermen that the Mistress worked with and or maybe aided in creating, or maybe it was just a brilliant plot point that they never fully fleshed out, where the Cybermen and where they introduce the Mistress fully and completely are made from organic components. They're just, infecting flesh. Now, they did kind of, again, in the Neil Gaiman episode, not the Doctor's Wife, but the Nightmare in Silver, they talked about the how they just take over flesh and, infect whole planets and take over that way. But I'm kind of curious to where is the leap there? Where is the technological advancement from these clunky-looking guys in suits to these metal menaces of death? And it's one of those things where I get they just wanted to, keep in times, keep with the fortune, and keep with the ideology of, these are what, this is the natural progression of all Cybermen, of all technological evolution of humanity and humanoids, encasing themselves in metal. But it created such a gaping plot hole that I just scratch my head at. However, it did help explain. It did help explain so very well the Doctor and the Master and Missy's obsessions and working points with the Cybermen so often, and why the Cybermen seem to hunt down Time Lords so well. It's all the Doctor's fault. It's little points like that that always amuse me and intrigue me to no end. One final thing as I wrap this up, there's such great things as we still see the ship escaping from the black hole, and it's still the colony ship due for Mondaz. But we know that there is escape pods and shuttles on the lower floors, and the lower floors have been occupied and taken over and run amok by Cybermen, and they're slowly progressing. If that whole ship is fully taken over by the Cybermen, which seems inevitable, especially with the consideration that it's still escaping that black hole, how does that ship and the Cybermen on board make it to the initial episode where the Doctor finds the ice tombs and all that other fun stuff that happens way back? It's one of those curious points is, did some of them escape? Is that the ship itself that crash landed? There are speculative points on how that occurs, because now we know how the Mondasian Cybermen rise up. We know the characters that are involved in that particular event in history. But my question remains is how? How did they get to those points? Did the ship, eventually collapse and break apart, and in shuttlecrafts they landed in various places, which would lead to the various stories and technological advancements that we see of the Cybermen? Or is there other factors that they just didn't really put into a well-thought-out plot point? That's what nerds like us are always good in being around for, is staying attentive and catching things like that. It's like, well, we know about this. This is the starting point. And we know some of the endpoints. But how did we get from point A to point F in between? So that's kind of something I hope people kind of speculate and think about a little out there. And I'm sure there's other things that I will spend a long time germinating and contemplating about, like Oh, what happened to Nardal? Because I love the character of Nardal. I thought he was a great character. A nice little tin dog. That is truly what Nardal was. He was the tin dog, but while he was full of sarcasm and quick wits and technological savvy, he also was more than just the tin dog. He was, as I like to say, he was like Mickey and Jack, just without Jack's sexual promiscuity. This Jack's sexual prowess. There we go. There's the word I'm going to run with because I can't seem to pronounce promiscuity today. Oh, fine. Now I can pronounce it. God damn it. And it was kind of nice to see him get it kind of a happy ending, even though everyone's inevitably doomed on that ship. Except for Nardal. Nardal will not be doomed because he's already a man machine. He's already a robot. He's a head on a body. So the Cybermen will ignore him to all ends, and that bears the question is, does Nardal become the first Cyber Controller? That's the question I want to know. Do the Cybermen recognize that he is a superior component, that he is so technologically savvy, he is so capable of all these things, and he has so much more knowledge than they do about certain interworkings of the universe? Could they install him? Could they place him as the new Cyber Controller, which would also conveniently lead to the various deficits and issues that the Montesian Cybermen and the later Cybermen encounter? Could it be because Nardal, before they took him and they upgraded him into this horrible component of their machinery machinations, that he remembered the flaws and the horribleness of the Cybermen, and he programmed them in to continuously have a weakness so the Doctor and so many others could fight and defeat this fearsome force of metal. And that's something I would like to see, that maybe they expand in the books and other telenovelas and things like that. Is I would like to see a nice closure point for Nardal, especially since they didn't give the late Brigadier General proper closure besides converting him into a Cyberman, which kind of bends my fucking cookie in all sorts of ways. Anyways, now that I've kind of dragged out various speculations and ideas and things like that, if you enjoyed this, if at one point you thought that was amusing, funny, or, whatnot, hit the like and subscribe button. It does me wonders, and, you can always find something interesting, hopefully, when I put out a new video. And, you know what? I hope everyone's having a good day. I hope everyone's had a good week, and I hope everyone is going to have a good week, especially with the 4th of July, just days away now. I really hope everyone has a safe and fun 4th of July, for those who celebrate it and who are partaking of it. Have a fun, safe 4th of July, and I will talk to you all later.